Hello, everyone. Ladies, gentlemen, and friends beyond the binary, welcome to Step Back Tonight. This is a show I do every Tuesday night, unless something comes up that I hang out with y'all. We talk about stuff and things. We used to do other things, but you guys didn't like that. So, hang out. There was a cat. She'll be around. She shows up from time to time. But yeah, this is Step Back Tonight. It's a weekly show where I talk about stuff and things, and we all have a good, nice, chill-out session. Interact with y'all in the chat. I see that there's already a lot of activity going on. That's awesome. And I guess I should preface with a couple things. One, definitely sorry about the time issue. I don't exactly know what happened, but all of my stream events got defaulted to Atlantic time or Newfoundland time, which is an hour and a half ahead of my current time zone. So a bunch of y'all came in here at like 5:30 and I was not here. Sorry. I still hadn't had supper yet or anything, so that's my bad. Although Thought Slime's from Newfoundland, so I suspect that he had something to do with it. It's the most logical answer. As for participating in the discussion tonight, of course, if you're in the chat, you can talk to each other. Please be civil, be open-minded, and don't be a dingus. My wonderful partner Kelly is going to be monitoring the chat, and on top of that, she's going to be collecting your questions and putting them into a little Google Doc that I can read so that I can answer them so I don't miss any questions. So that's all. That's a few things. Another thing that I can talk about is just some of the things that have happened recently. That the Brazil video came out a little under a week ago now, and people have had some interesting responses to it. I definitely think that overall the reception's been positive, especially from the Brazilians that I know and the Brazilian leftists, but it did bring out a contingent, I should say, of Brazilian nationalists and Bolsonaro stans that definitely made the video comments a little interesting. Besides that, I've been doing a project, in which case, if you guys could do this, through one of the things that you can get a hold of me on, so either Twitter or Discord or email Tristan@stepbackhistory.com. I'm trying to collect as many examples of some feedback from people, and I really want to know a thing that you like about Step Back and a thing that you want to see different. I'm trying to be a little bit more responsive, and I really want to take kind of like a take tabs, you know what I mean? What else is next? Yeah, and of course, I'd mentioned this yesterday on the Euro-friendly stream, but this is the America stream, so I feel like I should mention it a little bit, which is that Bernie Sanders went on Joe Rogan, one of the most cursed things I've ever seen on my newsfeed. But Joe Rogan, the quintessential dumb guy podcast, which frequently features far-right people, had Bernie Sanders, and Bernie Sanders was given the long-form ability to say his piece, and a lot of the comments and such show that there was a positive response. Apparently there's the data hasn't come out yet, but there's been some sign that, there's been positive response from former conservatives who are turning into very fancy friends of the Sanders Sandinista movement. So that's all very good news. Very, very good news. America stream. Do you mean the Canada stream? That's true. It's also the Canada stream. I am in Canada, so I probably should have done that one first. I don't know why I always do like the 3 opening notes from I'm Blue by Eiffel 65 when I don't know what to say next, but it's more fun than saying Okay. Are we all having a good time? Am I coming through? Do I sound nice? Do I look nice? We down to chew on some cuestiones. Some preguntas. Some question. Okay. Let's take a look. What are the questions in here so far? So, caught one here from 5:30 because of Newfoundland. It's Newfoundland's fault, just so you know. I love the captions right now. Oh, I forgot to mention, if there's anybody who is new to, if there's anybody who is new and this is your first time watching the stream, please let yourself be known. This is a very welcoming and friendly crew, and I would love for you to introduce yourself and become friends with the regulars. That's it. All right. So, question 1. Do you consider YouTube/Google your feudal overlord and yourself as YouTube's serf? How would YouTube operate and function in an anarchist utopia? Well, I would be lying if I wasn't going to say that YouTube isn't the core of my platform. Without YouTube, I'd be pretty right fucked as far as like my ability to conduct a lot of my business. That's for sure. To say that like it's my feudal overlord, I mean, insofar as like the amount of profit I generate through AdSense that they hoover up the majority of, yeah, there's something to be said about that. But like, I feel like monetarily though, my funding comes from so many different sources, and most of them Google does not take from. I get money, like AdSense from YouTube is not nothing. It's a reasonable amount of money. Honestly, I get a lump sum that is a mix of, like once a month, that is a mix of AdSense, so ad money off of YouTube videos, and also super chats. So I get that mixed together, and it's not a gigantic amount, but it is a reasonable, like it's not nothing. And when you are a creative like me, you have to really, get a bunch of little streams of nickels as you can. And so on top of AdSense, I make my money through Patreon. I make my money through Patreon and several, several freelance contracts. I do freelance writing and freelance video editing for a few clients. So, I do a little bit. I ideally do do a little bit of ESL tutoring on the weekends, but I haven't done that in ages because my client has not gotten in touch with me in a while. So there we go. How would YouTube operate and function in anarchist utopia? It would probably be, would not have to worry about things like AdSense, and we could maximize it for enriching content for making things that are engaging but also encourage a healthy relationship between creator and platform, which means that I think that an anarchist utopia YouTube would have a lot more community functions, would have less, would have no ads, obviously, and would probably bring back the video response and just have a lot more of like this is a community platform that we use to make content, but also I would picture that anarchist utopia YouTube would probably also have some what would it have? Oh boy, probably have some more of like that feel of like early YouTube. Like I'm realizing that like some of the people who are in this chat when I was starting on YouTube were babies or like young children. But when I first started on YouTube, it was much more like a blogging platform that just happened to use video instead of text. And that, I think, led to this sort of Wild West community aspect that I think YouTube has lost. And I think that a community YouTube would probably have a lot more. Adblock pays our bills, but the ads have gotten so annoying. You mean AdSense pays our bills. But in an anarchist direct democracy, how would you keep the majority from voting for stuff that would be bad for minorities? This seems to be Destiny's main issue with anarchism. First of all, that the idea of majority rule is a very statist way of looking at things. Most anarchist community decision making, unless extremely contentious, in which case you'd probably need to find an alternative solution anyway, would be about consensus building and consensus creation rather than just straight up and down votes, 50% plus one wins. I would argue that decisions would be made through other means without the issues of without like the unequal distribution of power, without the authority to use violence, and without the hardships of economic scarcity. I think that a lot of the things that Destiny is talking about, or that Destiny worries about, would not happen. Like, people act in ways like voting to take away stuff for minorities because of something called resource threat, and feeling like that if these people succeed, then they won't succeed, and that that sort of identification becomes a problem. So I would argue that if you take away resource threat, that a lot of that fear would go away. That's my answer to that question. And also to have a decision making through consensus building. And if you are in a situation where you're putting in a contentious enough bill or idea that you have to do a straight up and down 50 plus one wins, then it's probably not a very good solution. You should probably be looking for new solutions. And I feel like in a society that's based on maximizing the most benefit for the most people, you don't have to worry about making sure that the economy grows by X% by next quarter or anything like that. That you don't have to worry about there being a lot of rush for those decisions either. That's all the things that I would say. Does Thought Slime have the Newfoundland accent? He does not. He can do the accent if he wants to, but he's told me that it's very much like a rural-urban thing. So I guess he didn't live in a really rural area, so he doesn't have the accent. There's like class aspects, there's rural-urban aspects, there's like stuff like that. Oh, Naya M, you're new to the channel? Everybody, please welcome them to the channel. Please. Welcome them to the stream. Say hello. Make them feel welcome. Okay. Where are we? Why does Chris Cuomo hate hobbits? Oh gosh. Okay, so if you haven't heard of this story, the year like last yesterday was it? Somebody called Chris Cuomo Fredo, which I guess is a derogatory term towards Italian people, but like holy shit, it's got to be an old one. And Chris Cuomo had like a epic fucking meltdown calling it the N-word for Italians, which like really speaks to like trying to claim that Italians are some sort of persecuted minority, which is like complete bullshit in this day and age. But on top of that, just like the word has no power, and making that comparison is absolutely ridiculous today. If he was making that argument like 100 years ago, maybe, but like not today. And most people had never heard the term before, and so it just got really like a lot of goofs on Twitter came out about it. So that's a thing. Not to mention Chris Cuomo is like super goddamn rich, and like there's nothing like he wants for nothing in his life. It's such a funny, weird meltdown. All right. Do you think the global economy would still produce enough to satisfy everyone's needs if it wasn't capitalist? This is another thing Destiny asked non-compete. Well, am I going to have to respond to everything that happened in the Destiny stream? Yes. I think that we could ramp down industrial production right now by 40%. We could have the economy be 40% smaller, and we would still have enough stuff to cover all of the daily needs of everybody on Earth. Even less if we made everybody vegan. So, yes, I think that you would definitely need to implement some tools. There's definitely some things that you would need to develop in order to organize a global economy, which right now that job is being done by private corporations. But if they were done by economic management organizations, unions, things like that, you could definitely find a way to make a global economy function perfectly fine. Greed is good. It's literally a sin. Do you plan to continue the Brick series? Yes. Yes, I do. I don't know when I'm going to be picking it up again, but it's fairly likely it will be soon. I know for sure because there's a big collaboration coming up, like if everyone remembers, like Project Revolution and Project Odysseus. And there's one coming up about Africa, so I'll be doing a video. I'll be doing the South Africa video just in time for that one. So I know I'm at least doing that one, but the Brick series was a stretch goal on Patreon, which the stretch goal on Patreon, I said I would do them all, so I will get to them all eventually. But doing them all at once seems like it'd be we'll see. I like to explore. I'm going to be doing different things. Okay. Do you consider yourself a communist? This is coming from a communist. Where do you stand on the left wing? I consider myself an anarcho-communist. Yeah. That would be my answer. So, half yes. Okay. What does left-right mean today in case of politics? Well, that's actually... So, Mitch Connor, you're making a good point. So, the thing about the left-right divide is that it has its origins in the 18th century with conservatives who defended the monarchy versus liberals who wanted different forms of government. Sure. So that's one thing. But like today today it seems to mean, okay, well, it means different things in different countries. So, like, in America, which is by leaps and bounds to the far right of most other countries in the world, the left-right divide in America seems to be about whether or not you believe that certain classes of people deserve basic human rights. It seems that both liberal, like both parties in the United States want unchecked capitalism, market deregulation, wage lowering, and just general just worker hell. But whether or not you think sexism is bad, which is okay, we're having this level of discussion now, is or whether or not women deserve basic bodily autonomy, whether or not gay people deserve basic civil rights, whether or not people of color deserve basic civil rights, that is the left-right divide in America right now. In the rest of the world, the left-right divide means predominantly whether or not you believe capitalism is a positive or negative force. People on the right wing would say that capitalism is a positive force, and they try to increase the amount of capitalism in everyone's day-to-day life. So trying to take public services out of the government and privatize them. Or if you are left-wing, you want to take things out of the private sector and put them into the hands of the government. And a centrist usually tries to balance the two in some fashion that no one cares about. So that would be that's more or less the left-right divide. You said Brazil wasn't drastically affected by neoliberalism until the 1990s. Why wasn't Brazil already turned neoliberalism by the Chicago Boys like the other Latin American dictatorships? Good question. I don't know. I think that when you left that comment on my video, somebody else gave it a pretty good answer, and so I went with that one. And so I was like, okay, that's a good answer. Thumbs up. So go look to the reply on that comment that you left asking that exact same question, and I'll go with that as the answer. Suppose the FBI agents searching Epstein's home find stuff that incriminates a lot of high-up people in the Republican or Democratic establishment. Do you think it'd be covered up? Really depends upon the FBI agent and such like that. When you're dealing with that kind of stuff, it really is going to come down to individual people. Given the kind of people that work in the FBI, I imagine that stuff would probably not see the light of day for a fairly long time. There's some stuff about Epstein being a CIA asset, which might, the thing is that it's turning out that Jeffrey Epstein bragged quite a bit about things about himself, and now we're kind of sussing out which of these things were actually true. And one of the things he used to say is that he said he was a CIA asset, and now we don't know if it's true. If it was, there were probably going to be a whole lot of horizon for them to cover it up with 50-year top secret seals and things like that. But honestly, it's not honestly, I don't know. I don't exactly know how all that shit's going to go down anymore. I have weird feelings about this whole Epstein situation. Oh, we have a visitor. You ready? Come on. You've got 62 people who want to see you right now. Come on. Come on. Come on. There we go. There we go. Give the people what they want. That's what I always say. There we go. Okay. Unless it's something weird. It's an important caveat. Okay. Suppose Islam never existed. Do you think the Byzantine Empire would have survived into the modern era if it hadn't come into conflict with various Muslim empires? Yes. I don't think that, predominantly, the Byzantine Empire was crumbling already. from Christian invasions and all sorts of other stuff. But on top of that, like, it wasn't necessarily Muslims that, like, the group that took down the Byzantine Empire were certainly Muslims, but they were also Turks. So, like, you could just, we could just say that today that, oh yeah, the Byzantine Empire collapsed because of Turkish invaders. They would have whatever pre-Islamic religion the Turks had. All right. Okay. All right, so Naya M. Hello, new to your stream, but not to your channel. Love your content. Well, thank you, Naya. That's appreciated. Oh my god, this cat is crazy tonight. I'm starting a YouTube channel soon and was wondering what someone can use aside from AdSense. Sure, Naya, there's a couple things. So, when you're just starting out, when you're a brand new YouTuber, you can try getting a Patreon. Depending upon the kind of content you make, that can be very, very successful. If you're into leftist YouTube, Patreon actually works a lot better than a lot of other methods because there's a well-developed network of Patreon users, and I find that one of the motivations that people give to Patreon stuff, one of the reasons that motivates people to become patrons is because of the sense that they're giving money to a good cause. And so if you're doing like political stuff, that's a good cause. AdSense will never be that much, and when you're just starting out, like for your first like 40,000 watch minutes or whatever it is anymore, you really are not going to you can't monetize your channel anyway. So on that note, you can so Patreon and AdSense are probably two big ones. If you take your channel to like past like maybe like the 20,000 subscriber mark, you will probably start getting a few sponsorship requests. And also, depending upon the kind of content you can do affiliate marketing. It really depends upon what kind of channel you're running. So it's really all up to all sorts of stuff. Oh my god. Okay. Hopefully that answered your channel about what you can like use to make money besides AdSense. You could always use Coffee or Ko-fi or whatever it's called too. And did you see any part of the Guiton charity stream? It was awesome. No, I did not. Sorry. You got annoyed when with Liz Warren for wanting new social housing, as there was already many empty houses in the U.S. The Supreme Court, the U.S. just start taking empty houses. They've done it before. It's called eminent domain. They do it all the time. They can take people's property if they feel that it's needed for state function. Okay. Oh boy. This is a cat and a half. She's being very, very affectionate tonight for some reason. Now her ear is being weird. Okay. I asked you about sexual objectification yesterday. Do you think it's possible to indulge in sexual fantasies without sexual objectifying the people you envision in your head when you do it? I mean, I'm not exactly sure what you mean by sexual objectification in that sense. Like, if you are reducing a person to an object and not thinking about their autonomy, that's sexual objectification. That doesn't preclude, it's not like some blanket term to mean like all interest in people and all sexual fantasization and fantasies and stuff like that. Like, that's a very large body of mental activities that are not just like trying to dehumanize someone down to their like sexual parts, if you will. Like, sexual objectification is about like taking people and portraying them in a way so that they are not human or not fully human. Okay. If Canada becomes oh wait, no, I missed one. Have you heard about Texas trying to label Antifa as a terrorist group? I thought that the United States was trying to do that. Yeah, I have heard about it. It's terrible, and it's sad because it's probably a thing that will happen. Despite the fact that 100% of 2018's terrorist crimes were done by right-wing white nationalists, they're going to label Antifa as a terrorist group. It's so ridiculous. A group that has literally never killed anyone. Or at least not since like Italy in the 1930s or whatever. Cat, you enjoying yourself? Make sure the chat has a good, or all of you out there have a good. I noticed that the viewership went up to 73, but that is most definitely cat related, I think. All right. If Canada becomes a socialist state, would you oppose it still since you're against states and so on? Yeah. If Canada became a socialist country, I would look forward to being the left-wing critique of the socialist state. Or being the anarchist critique of the socialist state. I would not be like, okay, well, Canada has a socialist government now, so I can just like, oh, there she goes. We can't have everything. But yeah, like, I wouldn't just like, I wouldn't just go like, oh, I guess Canada's socialist now, so I can just roll over and not do anything. Like, there's still lots of things to go down. Okay. Non-compete mentioned he started from anarchism and then realized that communism comes with anarchism naturally. Did you follow that same path, or did you go from being a communist to an anarchist? I came from it the other path. I started... check your Twitter. Oh, goodness. Why are you heartless? Oh, good stuff. I'm going to save that one. Sorry. Comrade Jeb made a meme, and it was good. So I will retweet it, and then I will save it to my fan art folder that I keep all of the step back fan art and memes that I can find, because I love them. So if I'm ever having a rough day, I just go and look through all of the stuff that mostly Comrade Jeb has made about me. Okay. So yeah, to answer Laura's question, the first time I ever had a political leaning was probably when I was about like 12, 13, in which there was like a mock election. Like there was an election going on, and then my middle school had a mock election of the same thing. And so in order to do that, you had to like, research candidates and research the parties you liked and stuff like that. And so I did that. And I decided to back the New Democrats. And so that was so I've always been like on the left side of the political spectrum. And then when I got into high school, I remembered covering the 1917 revolution and the history teacher saying that communism is this terrible system that believes that everyone should be equal and that everyone should be paid and treated the same for equal work. And I was like, that sounds amazing. And she was like, doesn't that sound terrible? And I was like, I don't think we're going to be seeing eye to eye here. And then when I went home and talked about communism with my mother, she explained that she would kick me out of the house if she ever found out that I was a communist. And so over high school, I just became more and more radical communist or radical on the left wing. And then in 2007, 2007 was the year after I graduated high school. I got into YouTube. I made my first YouTube channel, and I started checking out YouTube stuff. And back then, YouTube was very communal, but one of the things that it had was anarcho-capitalists. Like, it had ANCAPs. And the ANCAPs... The ANCAPs I did not agree with on a lot of their things, but I had never encountered anarchist ideas before of any kind. And so I started listening to them. I started asking them questions about stuff. Like, this terrifies me to this day about what would have happened if I had any follow-up questions. But even I had an email back and forth with Stefan Molyneux at one point. Because I was just interested in anarchism. I didn't think it worked. I didn't like a lot of the capitalist stuff about it, but I thought I was just curious about it. And so I was listening to a lot of their stuff. And one of to answer your question, the question that I'm already anticipating, the email back and forth that I had with Stefan Molyneux was me asking him, what would communists be able to do under your anarcho-capitalist system? And he said that you could start your own communist communities that would just need to operate as capitalists on the outside. And I was like, oh, okay, whatever. And so I was interested. I didn't know boomers used YouTube. Holy shit, bud. I'm a millennial. Come on. So eventually I got more into radical leftist politics once I got on YouTube, Kel Surprise. And by 2009, I was starting to get into I was starting to merge the ideas in some ways. And in the fall of 2009, so almost 10 years ago now, I said, hey, what if you got rid of capitalism and the state? And I kind of came together with this idea I'm going to try and develop an idea of, because to me, I didn't know that it was called anarcho-capitalism at that point. I just thought it was called anarchism. And I thought that was just what anarchism was. And so I was just like, well, what if there was if I could develop a left-wing version of anarchism? Because I think that the state and the privatization was the issue of the anarchism, not the no state part. The no state part is what I was really interested in. The capitalism stuff I was less interested in. And so I was like, I'm gonna try to develop a non-capitalist form of anarchism. And very soon after, I realized that not only was I not alone, but that there was centuries of history related to this thinking. And so I became, I went and read the Bread book, and I got to do a whole bunch of fun stuff, and I haven't really looked back. So that's my whole thing. Where did I go? Okay, purely theoretical. What are your thoughts on progressive/leftist going on conservative/reactionary podcasts? Is this dangerous or good to reach out? That's another really good question. It really depends on the show, I think. 'Cause I think that there's not much of a constructive conversation to have with people who see debate as just a thing where you spout your talking points until you win, and then you make a video where it says, like, Ben Shapiro owns this leftist with facts and logic. I think that is a completely pointless thing to put yourself into. And I think that if you can figure out, like, there's a lot of, like, dishonest actors in conservative podcast space. But maybe there are a few that are not just grifters that might be worth talking to. Who would those people be? I don't know. I'm not like a lot of my comrades in left-wing YouTube sphere who seem to spend a lot of time watching right-wing YouTube. I don't watch that at all. So I don't exactly know who's out there. I still don't know what the difference between a Dave Rubin and a not Ben Shapiro. I know that difference, but I don't know the difference between a Steven Crowder and a Dave Rubin at all. I think that I still, in my mind, if my brain picture of the two people is the exact same person. Dave Rubin, Steve Crowder, and what's his name, Joe Rogan, they're all like the same person in my head. But I do know that there are some podcasts / like shows out there that are pretty conservative and pretty reactionary, but the interviewer is kind of a dumbass and doesn't really ask any hard questions to anyone. And so, like, I think that isn't like Dave Rubin like that, and so isn't like Joe Rogan like that, and so I feel like I would feel more inclined to go on their shows than, like, say, I think that, like, going on, like, Ben Shapiro's show would be a complete waste of fucking time. But I do think that these are conversations worth having. I think that if I were ever to participate in one, I would not approach it the same way that my fellow comrades do. I have kind of my own way of wanting to approach discussing stuff with people who disagree with me that I don't think I'll end up doing because nobody invites me onto their podcast or anything like that. That's just not I don't get to go on people's streams or podcasts yet. I'm not that relevant, I guess. So, doesn't really matter what I think. It's like, what are your thoughts on progressive / leftists going on conservative reactionary podcasts? I don't know. No one's ever asked me to go on one, so I've never had to make that decision for myself. And I feel like my concept of debate would probably not jive with a lot of people. I feel like if I were to debate Destiny, I would be spending too much time asking him questions about, like, oh, like, why do you feel that way? Why do you feel like, let's drill down here. Like, why do you think that this is such a good system? Like, what's your, like let's explore your mind, and then we can find out, we can walk you along and meet you where you are. Which I feel like would not make good WWE style intellectual battle, drop down WWE smash whatever, which is like, that's what people crave. So I feel like it would not make for entertaining streaming, and so probably why, one of the reasons besides me not being very famous would probably be why I don't get invited to people's streams. Also, I just want to announce that there are 69 concurrent viewers on the stream right now. Nice. Thank you. Okay. Why is that centrist Starbucks CEO even running for president? Oh, he is running for president? I thought he was. I thought he was thinking about it, but then he might have backed off. Why does anyone run for president right now? They're running for president because they want attention. like they want attention. Right now, I think, if anything, that Donald Trump showed that you can run for president, and even if you don't win, there will be no negative side effects to anything you do. So, I think people will continue to watch, or people will start running for president so they can get constant media attention, and then they can leverage that for various things. So, like Starbucks CEO guy, I'm trying to remember his name right now. I used to know it because we were talking a lot about him when he was getting into it back in the day. No, not Howard Schultz. That's the person. Howard Schultz. And so when Howard Schultz runs for president, or when Marianne Williamson runs for president, or any of those people like Tulsi Gabbard run for president, even when they're not doing well, they're getting tons of media coverage, and what they can do is their performance can then be used to push for different things. I think one of the most popular examples right now is Mike Gravel, who recently dropped out of the race, was essentially running on a platform of trying to get to eventually support Bernie Sanders, but to push him further to the left in public debates on things dealing with foreign policy. Then there are people like Tulsi Gabbard, who is basically interviewing for a Secretary of Defense job within the Sanders administration. I think that there's some people like Cory Booker who are trying to get their name onto a bigger platform so that they can run for president next time, because they know that they don't have the kind of grassroots support yet to launch a real campaign. And yeah, I think that there's a lot of reasons now to run for president, and not that many actually end up wanting to be president. I think that Donald Trump did not anticipate that he wanted to be president. He wanted the attention, and then all of a sudden started becoming president, started winning primaries. But that's why, some candidates like Tulsi Gabbard, who have zero, no strong base of supporters anymore, are still running, because even if they lose, they're still getting the attention. They can still make more of hay out of their platform. Did I miss the Neil deGrasse Tyson comment, or did it start yet? I meant to watch this. I just made that as a title, but Neil deGrasse Tyson is bad. There's actually a pretty good Trace Dominguez recently made a video about it, but the moral equivalency that he put out during that shooting was bad. Couple things I know about Neil deGrasse Tyson that I can also say that are fun, because they're from sources that actually have worked with Neil deGrasse Tyson. I'm not going to name names, but I know somebody who has had to work with Neil deGrasse Tyson as a guest to a conference. So here's a couple things about him. One, giant diva. Two, makes those false moral equivalencies like he did with the shooting all the time. He said that we freaked out too much about mass shootings, when he has gone on the record complaining that the stars are wrong in Titanic. But when it comes to Neil deGrasse Tyson, when it came to things like what was the thing he did? Oh yeah, so when he goes to conferences, he has one of the most diva writers of any public intellectual. He demands his writer. So, okay, rewind further. A writer is basically if you're going to book a celebrity for an event, if you're going to book a celebrity speaker, say you're going to invite, I don't know, who's a good person to invite? Noam Chomsky, maybe. All right, so Noam Chomsky, say you're going to invite him to come speak at a university. He will have, if he agrees to come to your thing, he will have a a document that'll get sent to the people who are booking him, and will say all of the things that he needs to have in order to speak. Usually it's a lump sum of money, and very often travel expenses. Noam Chomsky is notorious because, or not notorious. Noam Chomsky's writer is actually hilarious because he really just asks for travel expenses, and he like flies coach. So like he has like the easiest rider ever. But you've probably heard about these before. Like I remember that there was one point where Jennifer Lopez got in a lot of shit because her rider said that everything in her hotel room had to be white. And if you remember from like what's that last thing? What was that movie? Spinal Tap, where like they had to have only like all the brown M&Ms, like only green M&Ms, yeah, like that kind of stuff. That's all usually in a person's rider, and there's some legendary divas, and apparently Neil deGrasse Tyson requires like 5-star hotels, first class plane tickets, and like a lot of other stuff, like a shit ton of money to speak. Like Hillary Clinton's rider has her, she charges about $700,000 to come speak at an event. And very often, like that 5-star hotel slash like first class ticket thing is like for a 1-day event. And it's good to have, because if you don't have it, they'll just like they'll give you nothing. But on top of that, Neil deGrasse Tyson has gotten sexual harassment accusations against him that you probably, it's not anything to balk at. Everyone he just got all these sexual harassment accusations, and then he just everyone just kind of forgot about it for some reason, because the Me Too movement seems to have, like, everyone just kind of forgot about it now. I guess like we did them all. We got all of them now or something. I don't know. Oh, geez. So yeah, big diva, asks for a lot of money, and sexual harassment allegations. Apparently kind of a prick to work with. That kind of stuff. So Neil deGrasse Tyson, not a good representation of the intellectual community. What else? Can being overprotective of your children be abusive? Yeah, it totally can. I don't exactly... Not letting your children do things is definitely like stunting their growth, and definitely can be abusive. But I feel like this is some sort of trap question to get me to say something bad about Muslims again, because that's usually how these questions go. We'll see though. But I refuse to say bad things. Well, I refuse to say like dick things. Anyways. Next question. Can we have a step back meme that is let them see cat instead of let them eat cake? Sure. I feel like as the person who makes step back, as the person who is the focal point of said channel, that I think by definition, I cannot control the memes. Kind of like how nobody really gets to control what their nickname is in high school. I feel like what becomes a meme surrounding me is not under my control, and if I tried, it would be a disaster. See you later, dying atheist. Okay, so Quijano? Is that how that one is said? Hi, I stumbled into the stream accidentally and you seem to know what you're talking about. Before I ask anything, are you a degreed or practicing historian or more of a history buff / enthusiast? And what are your strong periods? So I have a master's degree in American Cultural Studies and a second master's degree in American History. And I dropped out in the third year of a PhD in American history. So my strong periods are like the period I could teach a course of U.S. history, a U.S. survey course. The period that I think would be my strongest is being considered about what's it called? I would think that post 1871, I think, is usually the big cutoff, is whether or not you're a pre or post 1871 Americanist, and I would consider it a post 1871 Americanist, which means that understanding basically post Reconstruction America is my expertise. But I know enough about pre 1871 America to teach it pretty well as well. So the United States is my strong suit. For my research area, my interest was in the September 11th attacks and the War on Terror. So that's my thing. That was my research. My thesis for American Studies was on post 9/11 Islamophobia and the changes towards hate towards him. And the second master's that I got was on the reconstruction of the World Trade Center in Manhattan. So it was about the designer of the redesign of the Freedom Tower and the 9/11 Memorial that's in Manhattan. I thought that the story of how those things got built, and specifically about why it took so long for them to get built, was really interesting. And so that's what my history MA thesis was about. I was going to do a video about it, but then freaking Betty over at Articulations did it better than I already did it. So now I have to do it on my own. I was going to do it as a collaboration with her because she's a buddy of mine, but oh well. Why do moderates and center-left wingers find mainstream white guilt culture repugnant? Mainstream white guilt culture repugnant. Why do moderates and center-left wingers find mainstream white guilt culture repugnant? I don't know. I think that there's obviously, like, to some extent, there's a defensiveness, because if you're a white person and you realize that you've been given certain benefits in life because of your skin color, because of the historical circumstances surrounding your skin color, that you somehow, in our society where we're so overly focused with making sure that everybody earns everything that they've got, that we can feel reflexively defensive about that. And it's an unhealthy instinct to have, obviously. But that's the argument that I would make anyway. It's an emotional reaction that then people intellectualize, and I think that it's not wrong to say that you have had benefits and you have gotten things that you would not have gotten if you weren't a white person or a man or a cis person or a heterosexual person or any of those things. Like that, I know that this is the case. And you try to, like, make the world a little bit more fair. Okay. Do you like the 19 winters during Stephen's reign when Christ and the saints slept deserve the epithet of the anarchy? I have no idea what any of that means. Sorry. Have you ever lost your phone? I don't think so. Or if I have, it wasn't for long. Like I think I might have like lost my phone once or twice when I was like really drunk in university, but then I probably got it back real fast. And also I didn't, oh God, this is going to date me so much. I didn't have a smartphone when I was in university. So It wasn't like the sort of like integral part of your life that it is today. My phone played a very small part of my life until I got a smartphone when I went to grad school. Also, I think everybody had, like, I think that this is just me being slow on the uptake because, like, I was in university from 2010 to 2013. So I feel like maybe it had more to do with the fact that I wasn't paying too much attention, that I just didn't have a cell phone. And I had a cell phone, I just didn't have a smartphone. I think the fact that I just didn't have a smartphone, and everyone else probably did, but I can't remember. It's like 2013 is when I got, 2013 is when I got my first smartphone. Okay. Okay. Where are we? How do you feel about the protests in Hong Kong, and why can't we do something like that here? I haven't. I honestly think that I haven't been following it too closely. I know that that's protests for some sort of autonomy or for independence. I'm not exactly sure. And all I've been hearing is that the Chinese are going fucking crazy right now. Like in the last, like they're like sending in like everything to put it down. But I don't exactly know the stakes because I've been working a lot lately on videos and freelancing and stuff. All right. Since we should be against states and all, does that mean Eastern countries like Russia and China were never true communist states? I mean, there's other reasons why they would not be true communist states. I think that the Soviet Union, as many would call it, would be closer to what's called a state capitalism. The fact that the Soviet Union maintained currency, maintained businesses, and just had state control over said businesses, more feels like state capitalism, where the government just owns all of it instead of the people. So yes, I would argue that the Soviet Union was not a true communist state. They would not say they were communist states either. If you know your Karl Marx, what they called themselves were socialist states. And what they wanted was to create this state that would make all of the things, line up all their ducks so that they could bring about communism, which could only be brought about when capitalism is finally defeated. The idea would be that communism, which is defined by Karl Marx as a stateless society run by what's called the dictatorship of the proletariat, which is when there is no more distinction. There's no class difference. There's no people who own the factories. There's no people who own the factories, own the roads, own the firms, own all the things, and people who work for them. So that's so like what communist, or what Marx would say, is that the best society, or that communism, is when there's no distinction between people who own all of these things and people who work at these things. That the factory is run by the people who own it. Or should I say, the people who own the factory are the people who run it. And there's not that much in the way of there's no state. There's nothing. It's all gone. So that is that's the way that I would say. That's the thing I would say. So that's why the Soviet Union then was, that was the idea behind the project of the Soviet Union. But then freaking Joseph Stalin took over the government and went on this like fucking megalomaniacal purge where he murdered everybody who possibly could have, everybody who disagreed with him, and a lot of people who agreed with him, anyone who he perceived to be a rival or a potential challenger to his authority, and created this perpetual state of fear that sort of set the Soviet Union on this authoritarian path to destruction. So that would be, stateless, classless. And what an anarchist like myself would say is, told you so, because there's not really, I would say that an anarchist, I think Radical Reviewers in the chat, so I'm sure he would be backing me up here, that an anarchist would argue that the path to communism, the path to the classless, stateless society is not through is not going to happen through a socialist state, because just like how capitalism is a system that is about reinforcing its own power by taking away the agency and power of others, the state is not any different. It just uses guns and soldiers and police officers instead of money. And so I would say that you can't really get rid of capitalism using the state. Sweet flag, Tristan. Thank you. Very good boy. What you need to do is get one of these flags that's cut to look like a milk bone. I think that would be like your thing. What time is it? It's 8 o'clock. Cool. What's your favorite nation in EU4? That's a good question too. I don't play EU4 all that much. It's my least liked of like the new Paradox games. Oh wait, no. Hearts of Iron 4 is my least liked of the new Paradox games, but Europa Universalis 4 is the second least liked. And I haven't even played Imperator Rome yet, so I have no idea. So my favorite nation in EU4, I have played, the only playthrough where I've ever gotten to the end was with the Ottoman Empire. And it was when the game had first come out. And in said Ottoman Empire, I did a no casus belli war against Morocco to take a west coast province, and then I colonized the New World and made like a huge Turkish, like kind of like Central America and Southern United States. So I'd probably say then that it would be the Ottomans, although the Ottomans are basically like the easiest person to play. But I generally do like playing the Middle East countries. I did play one playthrough as the Mamluks. That was fun. I think if I were to ever play it again, I'd want to play as Karakoyunlu, because it's like one of those ones that nobody plays, but everybody has to deal with, and I would love to play one of those. Or one of those like small crusader states that like instantly get eaten up by the Ottomans early in the game. I'd love to try it. If I was really good, I'd like to play as one of those. Like there's this one country in the 1444 start that has like just like a Star of David as its symbol, and I would love to play as that, and just like it's like an Anatolia or something, take over the world or whatever. That'd be fun. I wish I was like a DDR Jake type good at EU4, but then I would have to play a lot of EU4, and it's not my favorite game. What do you think of Justin Trudeau? Bad prime minister. abandoned almost his entire electoral strategy, like everything that he got elected on, he abandoned almost the second he became prime minister. Has been running roughshod over indigenous sovereignty, has been building countless oil pipelines, despite the fact that we have like a decade to reverse climate change. So that like there's not a, and also the fact that he just like told an organization to basically just like, or told his attorney general to just let a corporation get away with crime so that they wouldn't lose votes in Quebec. Like it's just a bad. There's nothing about Justin Trudeau makes me happy. Okay. Would you still be in favor of decolonization if you didn't think the Native Americans were potentially more socially just? Like, suppose the Americas were totalitarian before 1492. I have no idea. That's not the context that we're in right now, so I can't really answer that. I would probably think that was less good, but also decolonization is a good thing. All right. Okay. Sorry. Talking for hours on end makes your throat hurt. Can Jason Kenney of Alberta Conservatives really reduce the minimum wage for youth and alcohol servers? It sounds unconstitutional. I'm sure that there will be a constitutional challenge to it. There's a couple things you can do to that. You can say to that. One, they could successfully argue in front of the Supreme Court that if you factor in tips that they make the minimum wage. That's not a good argument, but that is an argument that they can make. And if they lose that argument, they can always just pop the notwithstanding clause, which is a thing where if a province feels that it is essential to the cultural cohesion of the province, they can invoke a notwithstanding clause to opt out of any part of the Constitution that they want. Saskatchewan did it to preserve the Catholic School Board. Quebec has used it on a million occasions. We recently had Doug Ford threaten to use it to... what was he using it for? He threatened to use it recently for some extremely dumb thing. But either way. Yeah. Canada is a confederacy, which means it has a very small and loose centralized government, which means that Alberta can get away with a lot. I tend to think the main difference between left and right-wing anarchism is left-wing anarchists don't hold property rights sacrosanct. Would you agree with that? I mean, it's about whether or not capitalism is good or bad. I think that a right-wing anarchist would say that capitalism is good, which it obviously is not. That's usually like your feeling about capitalism and about the human rights of others. One second, I'm going to adjust in my chair, which will make some noise, so I'm just going to mute this for like a second. Okay. Okay, where are we next? Should the government increase funding for the Canadian Standards Association? Sure. I like safety regulations. In order to reduce energy costs, should the government nationalize or privatize the energy sector? Nationalize it, baby. Every time you privatize the sector, it becomes shittier and more expensive. So you should definitely nationalize the energy sector. That way, the government is involved with it, and they have interests for that industry that are not just maximizing the amount of profit being made. Okay. Did you see American Johnson on Destiny? It made me realize how much you have to lay out all your cards on the table right from the outset. No, I did not see the American Johnson Destiny stream. I'm not particularly interested in that kind of stuff. I imagine that Destiny was like, capitalism is good, and American Johnson was like, no, it's not. And that both of them walked away thinking that they won the debate. It doesn't sound like it was very constructive to me. Although I did hear commendations on American Johnson's like patience in putting up with Destiny, and Destiny having a lot of bad faith questions. But in the end, it just doesn't feel like something that is worth however many hours of my time it went on for. I've got cats to feed. And I stream like 5 hours a week, so I gotta make my money in all the other time and sleep occasionally. Okay. Keeping calm, trying to keep from yawning. Yeah, sleep. You don't do that, obviously, because look how much I'm yawning and probably making everybody else yawn too. I know you're anti-money, but do you think in a system where everyone's basic needs are met with no cost, that money would still function as a way to let people choose the extra things they want without needing to support the community that they live in? No, I don't think that's necessary. I think that we could live in a pretty easily post-scarcity economy. And I think that if we lived in a non-capitalist society, we wouldn't really have the social pressure to do what's called conspicuous consumption. Like, I don't think that if there was no such thing as money and nobody worried about class or anything like that, that people would feel very inclined, or not many people would feel inclined to get a yacht, for example. So, like, I don't think that money provides a good function except to concentrate political and economic power in the hands of the few, because that seems to be the only way that money ever goes. So in my mind, explicitly not leaving any of the economy to market forces is the smarter idea. And just letting people go and take the things that they want. Because there's likely not to be shortages, or at least not many shortages, because we don't live in the Soviet Union. We live on 2019's Earth, where we already make 40% more stuff than we use. You want 4 graphics cards and 32 cores? Sure. I'm very sure that there are not that many people who want that much graphics cards and cores. Should post-secondary education be a provincial or federal responsibility? Given the Canadian system, probably a provincial one. The federal government has extremely small things that it's in charge of, and very specific. And post-secondary education does not fall under that. Plus, like, it means that provinces like Quebec can keep their tuition fees low, while the rest of the province or the rest of the country is get into, like, neoliberal bullshit. Yesterday, my brother texted me from Mexico to tell me he was amazed by how CNN hammers Trump. Was I right to tell him it's totally ineffectual grandstanding? Yeah. The whole, like, liberal centrist press attacking Trump is a way for them to sell newspapers. And also to there's like networks like CNN have a sort of desire to try and show all of the negativity and all the bad stuff that's been going on since 2015, 2016, and saying that it's all Trump's fault. and that it's an aberration and not a response to the way the world is. So in many ways, the liberal attempt to make Trump as the central bad guy, that if he can just get defeated in 2020, then by the most right-wing Democrat we can possibly field, of course, then we can just, say that this dark chapter of history is over and everything's been solved and we don't have to solve any of the underlying structural problems that that caused Trump to get elected in the first place. Just wipe our hands and say, okay, we did it. All the stuff that the economy was doing that led to the Great Recession in 2008, banks are still doing that stuff. In fact, they're doing it more so than they were before the recession. There are literal emails that are published that people have found from bankers being like, I really hope I retire before this thing explodes because this is going to take down the entire economy. So, I'm terrified. It's going to be, what's it called? We're in for another Great Recession in the not too distant future. And we did not fix the structural problems that caused the recession by electing Barack Obama and giving massive bailouts to rich people and giant corporations and banks. Surprising that no matter how much money we gave them, they still used it to make weird financial gambling and fuck up our electorate. It's almost as if there's some sort of economic model that we use that's fundamentally broken that we need to address. For anyone who knows, for anyone who's interested, I'm kind of reading a book about this right now called Post-Capitalism. So I'll probably have more weird opinions about economics once I've read the book. And I've kind of had some time to think about it. Okay. What do you think of sortition versus voting for choosing coordinators, supervisors in an ANCOM society? Pros and cons. I think that sortition. I think that it depends upon the kinds of things. I actually don't think that sortition is a bad idea. Sortitionism is a bad idea. For anyone who doesn't know, sortition is an alternative form of democracy that doesn't rely on elections. What it does is instead of say choosing your governing body by elections, what you would do is you would just choose, like if there were 10 seats, you would just choose 10 random people. And they would be chosen at random. They go to great lengths to make sure that they were chosen at random. And it would kind of be like jury duty. Like people take turns doing those kinds of things. And that's not a bad idea for an ANCOM society. It is a way to have like coordinators, supervisors, leaders, and things like that. But in a way that has no real power to it. Like getting elected means you have a sort of popular power to say that you are doing this job because, you were randomly chosen to do it, doesn't come with it that sort of aggrandizement that, say, an elected official would. And I think that it's a better alternative than a lot of the other ones I've heard. I'm sure there's some issues with it too, especially if you're talking about positions that require specialized skills and things like that. But we just need somebody who is going to run the meetings when we have our commune get-togethers once a month. Yeah, choose that person randomly. Thank you, Jake Anderson, for the $5 super chat. That's much appreciated. You just put food in this cat's mouth. Oh, the cat's not there. You put food in a cat's mouth. $5. Thank you so much. Keep stepping back, sir. I will do my best. Much appreciated. Literally keeping a roof over my head, friend. Okay. What type of bread is bread tube? Italian white black pretzel. Oh, This is a good question. I think it's a baguette, right? Because isn't baguette basically a tube of bread? And on top of that, the French are pretty on board with like the spirit of bread tube. So I would say that bread tube is baguette. Should the minimum voting age be lowered? Yes, I think so. In our current system, it would be more democratic if we could get the voting age lowered as much as we possibly can to people. I think that it would be completely normal to me to lower the voting age to 16. 16 seems like a decent enough age to let you vote. Especially because younger people have, the younger you are, the more of a stake you have in the outcome of said election. If anything, instead of worrying about what minimum age we have for voting, we should worry about a maximum age for voting. Because if you're over like, if you're over like 80 years old, your stake in the outcome for the vote is not like super duper. It's not super duper huge. Okay. Do you think it would be possible for the U.S. to become a progressive social democracy internally but still hawkish externally? Maybe if Warren gets in. Totally. The U.S. empire runs almost completely autonomously. The Pentagon gets automatically shit tons of money from the Treasury, and for the most part, they have operated for decades with little to no oversight. If there was a president who was progressive and left-wing and all that kind of stuff and just didn't pay attention to what the Pentagon was up to, then sure, yeah, you could totally have an imperial presidency or imperial country that is progressive, that could be a progressive social democracy. Okay. What are the important differences between anarcho-communism and anarcho-syndicalism, or do you believe they are ideologically the same thing with different functionalities? So Dario, I think that I feel like I might not be, my glasses might not be thick enough to answer this one. I don't know if I think that there's a distinction, but it's not one that I'm super, super well versed on. From what I know, anarcho-syndicalism is more, these are not mutually exclusive. That anarcho-communism is a state that we want to get to, and anarcho-syndicalism is a way to move towards anarcho-communism that focuses on unions. If I remember correctly, that anarcho-syndicalism is about, because syndicat is like the French word for union. So the idea of anarcho-syndicalism is to have unions take over the functions of the economy as a way to push towards anarchism. So you make one big union that gets all of the unions together. And when you got all the unions together, then they take over the economy, and that's how you make anarcho-communism. Okay. Based on historical trends, what do you see happening in the U.S. in terms of policy discourse, the social construct, and the general fabric of American society based on which candidate wins 2020? All right, so this is it's a bit more of an academic question here. So what do you see happening in the U.S. in terms of policy discourse? So to kind of, how do you see the way that Americans are talking about political issues? And for the most part, are about how different policies work. And in my mind, there's a lot of disingenuous reporting on there's a lot of disingenuous political or policy discourse, because really there are two political parties. The two political parties have their own political, like they have their own policy agenda that is slightly different than each other, but they are unable to function at the same time. They're at least more ideologically unified political parties, one being a far-right reactionary party and one being a center-right liberal party. Their policy, the way that they debate about it, is under the impression that, given the study of elections throughout the last few decades, that Americans don't particularly care about policy. That they care about snappy lines that they can remember that make it through punching the media. They care about feeling relatable with their representatives. That they can feel quote-unquote inspired by their politicians, which is a very American thing to do. And so the topic of policy gets sidelined, and you can often, it's very rare when Americans get to have actual policy discourse that's not just the left side and the right side trying to get zingers, and they have the same debates, they talk about the same issues, they say the exact same points that everyone has said before, and they make the same points, they have the same debates. If you guys remember, there was a video, or not a video, there was a debate, or the debates during the 2016 election between Trump and Clinton, where they said a lot of the boilerplate Democrat and Republican issues. They just said all the things they disagree with, and they said why they disagree with it. The conversation went nowhere, and it's also the things they said were the same things people were debating 10 years ago. Just no point. No goddamn point to the entire thing. And yeah, I think, and then kind of goes into the idea of the social contract, that the thing at the center of the American, Americas has always had this antagonistic relationship with its own government, that kind of goes in fits and waves. In more recent times, especially since the Cold War, the United States has had a lot more resistance to that kind of dissent that has kind of morphed into complacency in a way that is not is kind of ahistorical to the American experience. And that's starting to change now, because the American political system is really, really structured so that the people who have power come from the most wealthy and the most powerful already. And there's a lot of barriers in America specifically that are for keeping non-wealthy people out of the gates of power. And it's reinforced by electoral laws, by campaign finance laws, by a complacent press that is more worried about maintaining access than it is about telling accurate journalism. And so, there's a whole discord going on, which comes back more to the old school American idea that Americans have always kind of hated their government, which is healthy. Means that you just accurately understand what the role of the government is, which is to keep the powerful powerful and to keep you weak. And then when someone challenges that, say a Mr. Bernard Sanders, you get every single superstructural function of the state doing pretty much everything it can to resist his campaign. You see this in the ways that the Democratic Party, even the DCCC, the party that he's running for leadership of, actively like organizing and running things in funny ways, like even in small things, like they did some debate before they did something before the debate started, this like poll that was like, which candidate do you support? And the poll didn't have Bernie Sanders on it. Despite the fact that he had already run, and it had Joe Biden on it, and he hadn't even announced his candidacy yet. And like a complacent liberal press that is like, they've done like, I've been actually kind of shocked with how open the manipulation and how blatant the manipulation has been to keep to attack Bernie Sanders on like some of the most bad faith arguments I've ever seen. So yeah, it's been surprising. To kind of finish off though on the general fabric of American society is, I think that this is turning into, we're kind of moving into a moment where the America that we recognize today is more reminiscent of periods of right before great structural instability than we've seen in a long time. We very much have a sense of like America during the 1930s, except there's no FDR. You have like the recession of the 1870s, 1880s, 1890s, where there was a labor movement that was literally at war with the United States, where like, you know, they had like actual fights break out there. You had bombs going off. You had the Pinkertons, and like you had like actual police murdering like labor leaders. And I think that that kind of Gilded Age instability is closer to the period that we're going with. And even presidents like, I think that Teddy Roosevelt and Donald Trump are not dissimilar in some of these things, in some of the ways that they carry themselves. And I could see it. Why do you think conservatives hold the idea and the act of debate so highly? So Mason Johnson is the person who asked this question. Mason, I would recommend that you watch a YouTube channel by the name of Innuendo Studios. He has a series called The Alt-Right Playbook, and I cannot recommend it enough. And there's one of the videos, and unfortunately I can't remember which one it is, but it was a breakdown about how the right and the left don't see debate the same way, and that the right see debate as a way to exercise power. And conservatives respond well to displays of strength. That's what they want a state that is strong, that is willing to do the tough, horrible thing. So when they see debate, they don't see debate as a way to enrich, as a way to come to agreement, to understand each other better. But they see debate as a thing that is for winning. That is for defeating the other. Which, like, if you understand about like right-wing ideology, about how it's so about us versus them and destroying the enemy, then debate in the way they conceive of it makes a lot of sense. And this is why you end up with like people responding so well to Ben Shapiro destroying people with facts and logic. Do you remember that pizza place that put "Me Too" in their tweet? No. I like Tyson, man. Good at what? Are you saying that he doesn't communicate science adequately? I think the context. The left responds well to what? That's a good question. I don't think the left responds well to anything. The centrists respond well to displays of intellectual prowess and about logical displays of, like, a liberal will love feeling intellectually superior to someone. Specifically, like, catching somebody in hypocrisy. I was about to say one, and then I realized that it would be catching somebody in hypocrisy itself. Like, liberals fucking love Aaron Sorkin. He's like fucking catnip to those people. And it's because they love watching Martin Sheen, like, completely own a person and catch them in their hypocrisy. Like, that, like, makes them feel so good. And then I was like, they also love the feeling of there being no women having any important role in any plot whatsoever, which is also an Aaron Sorkin classic move, but different story. So, again, this is not my brain. Like, this is not my idea. Most of these ideas are not mine. This is all from the alt-right playbook. So I would say if you want to, like, kind of investigate these ideas a little bit more, then you should watch that. You should watch that series. How important do you think Islamophobia is as a global issue? It's a huge one. Given the events in Kashmir and China, Islamophobia is becoming more of a thing all around the world. There is genocides going on in places like Myanmar. There's genocides going on in of the Uyghur people in China. So the carte blanche that has given this kind of, like, global permission to oppress Muslims wherever they're a minority has definitely led to more than a few horrible situations and attempts at genocide. The left likes being horny. I figured it out. There you go. I think the left likes justice. We don't like displays of power, but we like displays of, righting wrongs. I feel like a lot of leftists feel like they want to be superheroes. What types of fiction do you read, if any? I'm typically a science fiction reader. I'm trying to think of the last few novels I've read, and the last novel I just finished was a mystery novel. It wasn't a science fiction novel. But I've read a lot of science fiction. I really like the Dune series. The next novel I read, though, is I'm trying to get into high fantasy. I've just heard so much about it that I'm trying to push myself into it. I asked on Twitter a little while back about what book I should read, and I got a recommendation to read the Mistborn series, so that's the next books I'm going to get into, but I typically I keep to the nerdy shit. I keep to reading science fiction and fantasy for the most part. The problem, though, Christina, is that I'm just bad at reading fiction. I really need to read more fiction because I always end up reading, like, books on productivity or history books or books on economics or something like that, and I never get around to reading, like, novels, even though I could probably use them. In a stream earlier tonight, Kevin Logan claimed that white people aren't really indigenous to Britain. Any idea what he's talking about? He's probably talking about Cheddar Men. So a few years ago, there was a skull discovered in Cheddar that showed that pre-invasion Britain, the people who live there, the first people to live in Britain likely were not what we would call white. And that people who live in Britain are the descendants of invaders from France, from Scandinavia, from all sorts of places that have kind of meshed together. Going to tweet the video. What is this? Oh, excellent. I'm glad you were able to find that. Oh boy, how are we doing? Where's my scroller wheel? Okay, we're not doing bad. It is getting, we're getting into the third hour, which means that I gotta pick up at some point. I gotta stop being so chill and relaxed. But this is the stream's doing really well tonight compared to like most streams. I'm surprised. It's pretty cool. Do you use your history degrees at work outside of YouTube? Yes. Besides my YouTube channel, I write scripts for a different YouTube channel, a freelance called the Cold War. So I write scripts for that, and also, I guess that's not outside of YouTube, is it? Thing is that YouTube, someone unknown, YouTube is my job. Besides, outside of YouTube and outside of writing for the Cold War, I also do video editing for people's YouTube videos, and that's where my money comes from. That's how my butter gets, or my bread gets buttered. So, if we were to abolish the police, do you have an ideal peacekeeping / murder solving problem? I do not have one myself, but I do know that there has been a lot of work by much smarter people than myself in the area of restorative justice. So Robert Corbin, I would recommend that you look up restorative justice and look up the murder and peacekeeping and restorative justice, and I'm sure that you'll find an amazing article by someone much smarter than me that talks about it. My guess that murders never happen because somebody is inherently and unchangeably evil at their core. That murders happen because of motivations, because of social factors, because of social ills, or because of mental illness or something. Something is behind a murder, and finding out what that is and finding out how to address it is the way to approach that. Do you think the Russian / Soviet state was doomed by vanguardism? Also, did Lenin fail by instigating revolution in pre-industrial Russia rather than industrializing first? I think that the Soviet state was doomed by Stalinism. Specifically, I think the worst things that caused Stalin to really long-term lose the fight was the imperialism, was the Soviet Union invading Finland and invading Poland and invading Estonia and Latvia and Lithuania and all those countries. And instead of letting them vote and letting democracy happen, just abandoning it altogether. That, abandoning democracy, was what killed the Soviet state. And imperialism. How my butter gets bread. Oh, man. Strategy versus tactic games. Well, I mean, tactic games are like puzzles, and like real-time strategy is really a tactics game. Or like I'm trying to think of like a pure tactics game, and it's chess. Chess is tactics. Yeah. Favorite Final Fantasy. I'm gonna be real vanilla and probably say Final Fantasy VII. I love the eco-terrorist plot of it. Although I played a lot of Final Fantasy VIII, I can't not for the life of me actually tell you what the plot of it is, which I think is not a point in its favor. When future post-apocalyptic archaeologists dig up our civilization, what do you think they'll misunderstand about our lives? I think that the biggest thing, what they'll misunderstand about our lives is that they'll think that we had some sort of reverence for plastic. That we, like, the fact that we didn't do anything about... They're gonna look at, like, a whole bunch of things. They're gonna look at, like, there was all of these catastrophes that face the society. And you can see that those catastrophes stayed for long periods of time, that people spoke out about them, that they understood them very well, but still chose to do nothing about them. And they'll be very confused by that. I'm not sure what conclusion they'd come to. Why does the right always go for full hyperbole like reactionaries calling an interracial couple on TV white genocide or ANCAPs calling taxes theft? Because hyperbole and stronger language is more emotionally engaging, and so it gets more people eyeballs on the issue. And the right are, for all of their flaws, very good at getting attention. In fact, a lot of their rhetoric and their the way that they think and talk is all about winning the attention fight instead of actually winning the intellectual argument. And I think that if the left are ever going to win, they're going to have to realize that is the key battlefield that we are engaging them on, and fight them at their own game. How would you hold property rights as sacrosanct and dislike capitalism? I don't know how you would do that. I don't do that. I don't think property rights are sacrosanct. What's the difference between a confederacy and federalist systems? Which one is the best for Canada or the USA? Well, it's hard to say which one is best, but a confederacy, it basically is about whether or not you feel like it's about what role you think that the federal government should play. A confederacy is an alliance of independent states that are bound together by a couple unified things. Mostly about things like foreign policy and stuff like that. So Canada is a confederacy where the provinces have a lot more autonomy to basically run themselves. And the federal government is extremely small. It has a very small role in day-to-day life. And it takes care of only a handful of things. Most of them having to do with interprovincial stuff and international stuff. While a federal government would firmly put the role of the states as subservient to the federal government, and the federal government plays a larger role in how things work. And I think that it's difficult to say which one's better, to be honest. All right. Oh man, views are going down. Someone must have started streaming. Okay. How did the Canadian provinces get their shape? Some are oddly rectangular. Yeah, the ones in the prairies, we kind of just drew lines on, like, I think like parallel lines or something like that, just because they were provinces that needed to be smashed together, because we quickly colonized those areas so that the Americans wouldn't take it. In like the late 19th century. And I think the rest of them, they follow like rivers and stuff like that. Bring the cat back to restore the views. Oh, the cat. You think that I could control the cats? They live on their complete own schedule. What is more true, though, is that they're starting to get hungry because I feed them before I go to bed, and it's getting close to my bedtime. So they're gonna get real active in the next hour or so. Debates achieve little. Should leftists take part in them anyway to avoid being accused of intellectual cowardice? No. I don't see what. I don't like I'm participating in this debate just so that, like, they're gonna call you an intellectual coward anyway. They'll just, like, it's like the people who are like saying we can't become socialists. We can't say that we're socialists because then they'll call us socialists. It's like they're gonna do it even if you don't say it. Like, come on. No, just like validating their opinion by putting it on equal footing with them just doesn't, it's not right. It's like debating with climate change deniers or flat earthers. Like, yeah. Oh, we're back to 69 concurrent viewers. I just wanted to point that out. Nice. Okay. So where are we? Why did you stop studying for your PhD? It must have been a painful decision. It was a painful decision, Ian. I debated it for like 6 months, if not longer. The reason was, so I was doing the PhD, and I started YouTube shortly into my PhD. And in 2017, Kelly had gotten a job in Toronto, so we moved to Toronto. And one of my supervisors was dealing with his wife who was struggling with cancer. And another supervisor was on sabbatical. And so I was not in the city where my campus was. I did not really have access to either of my supervisors. And I was working on this dissertation project, which, like, I was basically in the situation where it's like, you have the dissertation project, like, you have to finish it sometime in the next, like, 2 to 3 or 4 years. And you can do that, and you can do YouTube. And so I found that I was in this situation where, one, I knew that if even if I did finish my PhD, I wasn't planning on going into the academy. Like, I wasn't planning on becoming like a professor, because it's a nightmare hellscape where everybody is murdering each other for the highest seat on the Titanic, because there's like fewer and fewer jobs for more and more people. But on top of that, so I knew that it was a dead end to me to finish the PhD. There was nothing I was going to get out of it, except that I could call myself a doctor. That was really it. Then I was doing YouTube, and YouTube was doing real well, and it was making money, and it was growing. It was growing all the time, and the amount of money I was making on it was getting bigger and bigger. And so I was in this situation where, you know how typically you're in a situation where you're like, okay, I can do the easy and fun thing, but the easy and fun thing does not help you in the long term. Or you could do the boring and tough thing, but it helps you in the long term. And I had that completely rewired, where it was the fun thing was the thing that was actually advancing my career, and the not fun thing was the thing that was holding it back, or that was like not going anywhere. So in my mind, I was at a point where I was like, okay, well, like, this is the career path that I want to go down. This is the thing that I want to explore. And if anything, doing a PhD right now is holding it back. It wasn't helping me get towards where I needed to go. It was just making a lot of time that could have been spent growing my business, so that I could live off of it, spent sitting on a laptop trying to figure out how to do machine learning. And so eventually I came to the conclusion that it would make more sense for me to go down the path and figure out this YouTube thing rather than keep trudging along with my PhD. Because especially with a dissertation, like dissertations require 150% of your enthusiasm. Like if you're not super, super enthusiastic about doing a dissertation, you're never going to finish because it's so much work. And I was just like, I realized like I was never going to invent the energy and intentionality to finish it that I was ever going to get. And so I walked away. And I have not regretted it at all. Not even a little bit. Because things have gone... I mean, things were tough when I was like working for CCLA, and that was eating up a lot of my time, and I was having a hard time building my channel then. But now that's over, and now I'm doing the thing. I'm actually doing the thing. So strange. Do you think it's fair for some people to have access to resources to build their computer up while other people don't get to build their computer up? No, it's not fair. No. Everybody who wants a beast machine should have one. I just don't think that that's everyone. And I think that a lot of people who have beast machines buy things that they don't use and they don't need because they want to show off on Reddit. And I think that that's dumb too. Is it possible for someone to go back to university even though their transcript is horrible from the last time they attempted to get a degree? You could certainly try. There's a lot of leniency put in place for people who want to go to university who are older. Like the application stream that you go through to go to university is different for like an older person trying to go back to university than like a 18-year-old out of high school trying to go to university, to the extent where it's a lot easier to get back into the system. And so because older students who return have a much higher chance of finishing their degrees compared to 18-year-olds. When they're choosing among the 18-year-olds, they're trying to reduce the fact that like 40% of people drop out in the first year. So but like returning students have a pretty high graduation rate, so they don't worry about them too much. They're not as much of a liability. In what ways is Quebec a better province for college and healthcare when there are racial issues and immigrant xenophobia? Yeah, there is issues with racism and xenophobia. Just the only thing I said about college and healthcare is that Quebec is a cheaper place to go to university. It has the lowest tuition. If you're in the province, if you're a Quebecois citizen going to a Quebec university, it is very cheap. I don't know how it stands on healthcare. I don't know how the Canadian healthcare system is ranked really. Okay. Glass-Steagall still not reinstated as in stop a second depression law. Nope, it still hasn't been. It's on... do you know of any good anarchist fiction? I do not. I'm sure some people do. I'm sure some people probably already recommended some in the chat. I'm sure somebody recommended Ian Banks. A while back, I listened to a podcast that said the politicians had said in 2008 couldn't adequately address the crisis because neoliberalism was too deep in their thinking. Agree? Hard agree. Yeah, totally. I think that politicians can't handle the crisis of right now because neoliberalism is too deep in their thinking. Like, yeah, it's been 11 years and we still haven't been able to defeat neoliberalism. So, are you Canadian? Why do you say we when talking about the U.S.? Usually when I'm referring to we as in like we, the left, or we progressives, or we as people who have a interest in getting Bernie Sanders elected. I am a person who is interested in Bernie Sanders getting elected, and also America is the global empire, and so we need to advocate for, what happens to America affects the world, and we need to be more cognizant of that. That's all. What would be the maximum age for U.S. politicians and high-ranking judges? Let's say take the average age in the country and subtract the amount of time between elections. If you have a over 50% chance of being dead by the next election, you probably shouldn't vote. That's my thought. Because you have like literally no stake in the outcome. Suppose your plan to create an alternate socialist economy work really well. Are you worried what's left of the old U.S. government will opt to destroy us, maybe with nukes rather than die? I don't know. I hope not. Checkmate. Step back owned. Didn't even consider that people would rather destroy the world with nukes rather than end capitalism. That's capitalist realism right there. I don't know. I didn't think about it. It was like literally a brain, it was literally like a brain dump. The alternative economy idea I had was like this just thing I couldn't stop thinking about one night while I couldn't sleep. And I put it down on a piece of paper or I put it down on Twitter and I talked about it in some streams, and that's it. I didn't really consider about the nuclear option. Do you think America will split into a fascist country and a socialist one? No, I do not think that America will split in any way. There's not going to really be a secession crisis because, unlike previous periods, the division in the United States is not geographical. And in order to make a country, you kind of have to have the people of certain ideals in different areas, I guess, in different area, like at different locations. And so, sorry, this is probably really loud. Okay. And so, in my mind, that's probably why this civil war, this digital civil war, as Peter Dow said in his book, will probably not be like a straight up like splitting the country type thing like we were talking about. To what extent did Antipodean civilizations of Egyptian and Maya share cultural ideals? No idea. That's so classics. Go talk to a classics professor. Okay. Is Bill Nye a better person than Neil deGrasse Tyson? As far as I can tell, but who knows? Have you heard of / read the book How to Hide an Empire, The History of Greater United States by Daniel Immerwahr? No, I have not. Is rent theft? It is nothing else but theft. It is literally people getting paid for doing basically nothing. Do you ever just kill 30 to 50 feral hogs after playing Farming Simulator 2019? Oh man, is Farming Simulator 2019 good? Should I play it? Can you kill 30 to 50 feral hogs in it? That'd be interesting. What is the dumbest organism that will be ethical? What's the dumbest organism that is ethical to kill and eat? I tend to think we shouldn't eat other mammals or neoaves birds. Honestly, in many ways, I think if you're making that distinction, you should be reconsidering your entire desire to eat meat in the first place. Because you're never going to find a line that separates those in a way that you'll feel satisfied with. That won't feel like, splitting straws or splitting hairs. That's the word. Are televangelists popular and powerful in Canada? No, they're not. I don't know why, but Canadian political culture highly discourages open religiosity. Oh, hi. Surprise. She's like, surprise, motherfucker. All right, let's adjust the camera again. What I need to do is get a second camera and just have a permanent cat cam. Or get like a cat bed. I need to get like a cat bed and put it on the table over there. And so there's just like a cat in the shot at all times. Because that's obviously what people want. Hey, girl. Okay. All right. Isn't the video game industry the perfect canary in the coal mines for what capitalism is going through to look like in the future, if capitalism is still around? That it's not a bad industry for that, because it does kind of have the unstable gig economy stuff to like a pretty strong extent. Definitely, like some of the worst excesses of capitalism come from like the software development world. Oh my. Go check your Twitter. I'm sorry. My arm that uses my mouse is currently occupied with cat. And you don't want me to put down the cat, do you? For the cat bed is left the best. You know it is, some random geek. Thank you for the $2 super chats. Very much appreciated. I shouldn't get that goddamn cat bed. I've been thinking about it for a while, of putting a cat bed on the table there just so that people could see cats at all times. Mwah. Yeah, you're very cute. She's purring. I don't know if you can hear it. Would a small agrarian utopia be preferable to a metropolis of hierarchy and despotic inequality? Yes. To an extent. I would rather a metropolis, relatively an urban utopia, because it seems that humans are incapable of interacting with the environment without destroying it. So I would prefer if we just like lived in a handful of megacities and left the rest of the world to take care to restore itself. Jeez. Okay. Was there a left-wing party in antebellum America? Were there many left-wing movements in American history during the antebellum era? Not really. The political currents in the antebellum era, like, I can't think of any, really. There probably was some, but like the big issue in America was about slavery versus not slavery. And that was the major political issue of the day. A lot of the debate was about abolitionists and free soilers against those who supported slavery. Do you consider yourself to be part of the breadtube community? A little bit. I definitely at arm's length. I think that I tend to think that I am, but I don't think that the breadtube community thinks that I am. I've seen people talk about me on Reddit, on the breadtube Reddit, about how I'm a liberal and shitty and all that kind of stuff. And so like I don't think that the breadtube super likes me, but some people do. And I would say that I ride a line between like just straight up education and like leftist social justice stuff. Um, in a way that I think I'm a bit more on the education side than like say Philosophy Tube would be, but that's something I want to change. I want to be more like Philosophy Tube and less like what I am now. When it comes to like activism versus teaching type stuff. Um, okay. What would the university system be like in a communist anarchist society? Free, plentiful, not not like required. Like I think there's a lot of people like right now there's a lot of people who go to university who don't really have a good time and they don't really need to and it's not really important to them because university is essential for getting a job that is basically not living paycheck to paycheck, and even then, only if you're lucky. So in my mind, university should be a thing you go to as part of growing up and enriching yourself and getting out there and exploring ideas, and not like a factory you go to get a diploma so that you can become, so you can get a good job. So I think universities would be a thing that you can go to several times in your life and do many different things. Getting some very nice purring in here. As the war on drugs becomes more unpopular and legalization of weed, etc. occurs, how would it evolve to keep jamming people in prison? Well, Doughboy DeVito, I think that you can probably look to the Canadian legalization of cannabis system, where they legalized cannabis, but then they put tons and tons and tons of restrictions on it so that it's basically guaranteed that almost every single case of using cannabis is still a crime. I'm sorry, girl. I'm sorry. You just gotta scroll down and look at the meme. I did see the meme that was me with the stock market, which I think is pretty funny. All right. Makes me happy. Why are you reluctant to read Ian Banks? Is it because tech bros are fond of and badly misunderstand his work? No, it's just that I haven't read a novel in ages. And I've got a big, long list of novels that I want to read. I'm sure I'll read it at some point when I feel like it. Do you think that ecology would be a mandatory course in education? Yeah, I do think that at some point understanding the natural systems of the world is pretty important. Would you rather fight Mike Tyson or Conor McGregor? I'm going to go with Mike Tyson because I don't even know who Conor McGregor is. I'm hoping that he's younger than Mike Tyson, and that Mike Tyson, I might be able to win on just him being. I might be able to have the highest chance of not just getting instantly destroyed because Mike Tyson's a bit of an older gentleman. Do you think Trump's Gamergate fans will abandon him if he sticks to the games cause shooting line? I don't know. Those same people stayed with him despite him destroying net neutrality, so I don't think so. How do you think we resolve sectarian mistrust and outright hatred between anarchists and Marxist-Leninists? I wish that I hope that it could be about keeping your eyes on the prize, and instead of wondering what we can do once quote unquote the revolution happens in all caps, that we can more come to a thing about achievable political goals that we both have and working on them together. Make sure that no, it's not quite there yet. There we go. That's better. Let's see, I haven't seen the chat in a while. Okay. What are your thoughts on physicist Brian Cox, if you have any? I don't really know too much about Brian Cox. I think I've seen, like, he's very big in the UK, but not very much outside of the UK. I think I've seen like maybe one or two like space BBC documentaries that he hosted, but besides that, like I don't know anything else about him. I don't know much about him. He seems, from my experience, he seems all right, but I don't know. I literally don't know the first thing about like who is the person. But like, I don't know. He has a nice, calm, soothing British voice for describing how black holes work. Okay. Okay, where were we? Suppose all humanity did spend most of our lives in megacities. What would the rules governing when we get to leave and spend most of our time in the wilderness? I don't know. I don't have the answer to that. My guess would be when you want to, but just don't live there. Imagine keeping some green space that is partially allowed for people to go camping is fine, but like for the by and large, the most of the ecosystem of the world would be kept to keep people away from, so they can restore themselves. Which conditions promote electoral choices that are in line with the voter's own interests, thus enhancing the role of elections as instruments for holding governments to account? I don't know. I don't think that there really is one. I think that the idea of using electoralism as a way to get to enhance like holding governments to account is the way to do it. I think that most of the important political decisions that people make are not made at the ballot box. Any Chomsky on that list? Oh yeah, there's tons of Chomsky on my to-read list. Do beliefs yield to evidence? Belief persistence versus change in response to congruent empirical findings. I mean, I think that changes for different people, and I think it changes based on how core said belief is to your identity. I think it's varied quite a bit. Why aren't there enough videos on YouTube disproving the Great Replacement and debunking the myth that Europe will turn Islamic? There are a few. That's what basically the Sean channel is all about. There definitely should be more, though. I agree. When is it ethical to keep animals as pets? When I was 12, I had a vegan teacher who said it's only okay to have dogs because they can't live without us. I don't actually have an answer to that. That's a pretty... it's an interesting philosophical question. I imagine that that's a better philosophical question to ask Mexi. She did an episode of the Vegan Vanguard about pets, and I think that she probably has a better take on this than I do. Okay. Do you think leftists should dedicate time and capital on electoralism at all? And if so, to what extent? I think that electoralism is important. It's just not... I think that electoralism, like dedicating time and resources on electoralism is important. I think, though, that we need to make an approach to it that is different than what we have now. Again, it comes down to we kind of have to not see choosing a leader as how we fix all of the world's problems, and that we have to see electing better leaders as under the current system that we have now as merely a positive step that we can make, but not even close to the thing that we need to do. For the most part, we need to be more active and keeping things accountable. And by that I mean just getting rid of the state altogether. Are citizens willing to accept journalistic fact checks of misleading claims from candidates they support? and to update their attitude about those candidates. I think we've learned very quickly the answer to that is no. Okay. So I have hit the end of the questions, but still keep going. If you guys have any more questions to ask, please do go ahead. I'm going to, while you do that, just take a quick washroom break, and then when I come back, hopefully there'll be some more questions and we can keep going. Let me just get one of my fancy new memes up in here as the new splash screen. And then I will be back in uno momento. Okay. All right. I'll be back in a minute. All right, everyone, I am back. Sorry about that. Just let's see where we are. So when was the last question I answered? Okay, so we got a few more. Thoughts on Stephen Hawking? I don't know too much about his personal life, but as far as I know, he was a great contributor to the field of theoretical physics. He basically redefined the work on black holes, but I don't know that much else. Will Bernie bring back net neutrality? I certainly hope so. Where do cats come from? More cats. Don't ask where the first cat came from, because then we're gonna have man wasn't meant to know. Would cities be a better place to live if there weren't as many cars? Objectively, yes. If there were no cars, cities would be amazing, and everyone knows it. In the U.S. and sometimes in the U.K., actors or actresses get involved in politics. Does this happen in your country? Yeah. I don't think as like overtly, but yeah, it happens. What's it called? Nickelback played at a benefit for Stephen Harper at one point. The problem is that our politicians our celebrities are basically American celebrities. So, unless they're a specifically Canadian, person, Canadian, like celebrity, and that doesn't happen very often. Apart from government ministers, what do you think that most politicians actually do all day in Parliament? They go to meetings. They talk, like, very often when a bill actually goes onto the floor, it's the end of, like, a long, long, long process of development. So very often politicians spend a lot of time, like, going to meetings and trying to develop and make deals and things like that. And on top of that, they also have to fundraise a lot. Should citizens be made to take some form of intelligence or general knowledge test before being allowed to vote? No. Alternate history fans love the idea of Nazi Germany surviving World War. Okay, maybe I should. No. Barring people from voting based on metrics such as intelligence, which is not really something that we can actually measure in any meaningful way, is not a good way to stop people. Is not a good way to. And also, yeah, you shouldn't. No, it's not a good idea. So alternate history fans love the idea of Nazi Germany surviving World War II. If it had to, you think it would have just ended at some point, i.e. like Francoist Spain. Yeah, I could see that. I could see Germany, if Germany somehow survived World War II, if Germany just, like, if Hitler just died and the cult personality was gone, that it could be that that Germany would not be able, like, the German, like, a fascist German state would not be able to survive that. Are you concerned that if Bernie Sanders becomes a Democratic nominee and wins the presidency, that Trump will refuse to give up power? My worry is that he'll literally incite a civil war. I don't think so. I think that now relying on Trump's, I don't know. I think that Trump is only going to be as powerful as his as people are, and I think that refusing to give up power is one step too far. In a way that I think that I don't think, like, I think that if Trump, like, lost the Electoral College but won the popular vote, that's where he would, like, refuse to give up power. But I don't think that if he actually lost the thing, he would just be like, I refuse. What kind of music do you like? These days, most of the songs that I listen to are ones that I found off TikTok. That's not a good answer. I like a lot of musical theater. I used to be really into metal, but I'm not really anymore. Jeez. What kind of music do I like, Phoebes? It's a lot. It's pretty all over the place these days. Is the Stargate TV show your country's greatest work of art? One, I've never seen it, but two, I didn't even know it was Canadian, but I know that a lot of TV shows are filmed in Vancouver, so it doesn't surprise me. Okay. You see, okay, internet, you see what I have to work with here? By the way, we're at 69 viewers again. I just wanted to make sure you knew. I have to deal with this all the time. Should we invest in billions into building a giant city of tubes for hamsters? Call it Tube City? Yes, definitely. If anything, we could make that a project to keep Elon Musk busy while the rest of us, while the grown-ups fix all the world's problems. So that people don't start investing all of their angel investment in this, like, what I'm increasingly starting to think is a bit of a con man. People sometimes say if you don't vote, you have no right to complain about a government. What do you think? Do you think that if you vote, you ought not to complain, you take responsibility? No. Especially because there's so many barriers put towards letting people vote. And also, like, there are so many places where your vote does not matter at all. So yeah, no, it's that's a mean-spirited thing to say. That's the thing that people say, not because they actually believe it, but because they want to shut you up. How old were you when you first voted? Was it your first opportunity? Yes, I think I've only ever missed like one election in my whole, no, two elections in my whole life where I didn't vote. And one was for mayor, and one was a provincial election when I didn't live in the province. Um, I think the first election I voted in was probably in 2007 or 2008, which would have been the federal election that where Stephen Harper went from a prime minister with a minority government to a prime minister who still had a minority government. So it was a very inconsequential election either way. Um, I don't know. Now that it was like 12 years ago, I don't really remember very much of it anymore. Not to mention, like, a lot of beers are between me and when I was 18, which make remembering it also harder. Um, Favorite musical? Ooh. I really like Hamilton, despite it having lots of historical inaccuracies that drive me nuts. I think that the thing slaps. Um, yeah, I think that's my answer. Fan of the X Files? I don't mind the X Files. I remember watching it with my dad in the 90s, and I remember being a kid and being really scared of it. But I haven't watched it as an adult. Do you think space exploration would be further along if we actually found life on Venus or Mars? Probably not. Like, let's be honest. Probably not. Okay. So that's all the questions. Does anyone have any last questions before we start winding down for the night? I feel like I've answered a lot of questions, but if anyone's got anything they've been sitting on, uh, or we can all enjoy the rest of our evening. What are some historical inaccuracies in Hamilton? Ooh, Laura, you know how to ask good questions. Okay. First of all, the portrayal of Alexander Hamilton as a person who, like, one of the things that Lin-Manuel Miranda tried to get across is that he thinks that Alexander Hamilton was of mixed background, which there's no real verifiable truth of that. Um, there's also, but that's a small thing because the entire idea of the play is that it's supposed to be race neutral. So I don't particularly care that much. Um, the the big thing that really like grinds my gears about Hamilton is that it somehow tries to portray Hamilton as being anti-slavery when Alexander Hamilton, while he never owned slaves, he did buy and trade slaves for his father-in-law on multiple occasions, which I thought was an unfair portrayal of Hamilton. It's a lot of stuff that's made to make Hamilton look good. It doesn't talk about the fact that Hamilton was very elitist, that he didn't really think that his proposition, his constitutional stuff was all about how the general rabble don't really understand politics and they shouldn't be allowed to vote. Like, he was part of the Federalists who were very much like the pro, like, taking away people's right to vote if they don't own land and like all kind of shit like that. Um, that's the bigger stuff. Um, what's your take on the Socialist Rifle Association? It seemed I mean, is Radical Reviewer gone? I don't think that. I think that there are a lot of socialists who think that somehow we're going to fix and have the revolution in all caps TM if we just get enough guns and LARP the 1917 revolution. And in my mind, I don't think that's ever going to be successful. Uh, in my mind, I think that we will always. That is bringing a knife to a gunfight. That is using, like, when you are trying to combat an enemy, the number one rule is to not fight them on the battlefield that they want to fight on. And the state has the state's power comes through its superiority of capacity for violence and violent power. So to fight them on the platform of battle is going to be attacking them where we are weak and they are strong specifically, which I think is a bad tactic. Do you think? Oh wait, we did that one. Why are minority governments allowed? Why don't the Libs and NDP form coalitions? There's been talk about the NDP and the Liberals forming coalitions before, but the Liberals always refuse to play with that. And on top of that, the Harper and the Conservatives did a pretty good job at poisoning the well when it came to coalition governments and trying to convince Canadians that coalition governments are somehow bad or not democratic, when they're like pretty standard way that people do things in Europe. And also the NDP and the Liberals have pretty solid what's it called? They have some pretty big major disagreements at their core that will always destroy the coalition. Play any trading card games? I do not play any trading card games, Some Random Geek. When I was a younger lad, I played Magic the Gathering for maybe about a year. And I got to a point where I was like, if I want to keep playing this game, I'm going to have to, like, if I'm going to play it, like, this happens with me with a lot of games, sadly. I get to a point where it's like, all right, if I want to keep getting better at this game and I want to, keep progressing as a player, I'm going to need to invest myself a whole lot more into it. And in the case of Magic the Gathering, that meant I needed to start spending a lot more money. And I was like, actually, fuck this. And so I, as soon as I came to that point and I was like, you know what? Screw it, I don't want to do this anymore. And I sold my entire collection. Including some cards that ended up becoming very valuable later on. Which is a little sad, but that's okay. I ended up getting and then I also got into Hearthstone for a bit, but kind of the same story came up. I used to really like, with Magic, I used to really like drafts. I thought drafts were always fun. Just like I really liked, I think in Hearthstone it's called the Arena, but still, I like if I like Hearthstone. I haven't played it in a long time though, because in Hearthstone all I like playing is the Arena, and I really didn't like the fact that I ran out of like gold to play arena matches, and then you would have to either go and play Constructed, which is I didn't want to play, just so you can get enough gold so you can play the mode that you do want to play, which I think is dumb. Or you pay real life money, which is like also dumb. So I just don't play Hearthstone. Cake or pie, pancakes or waffles? I am definitely much more of a pie person than a cake person. So much so that Kelly actually made me a birthday pie instead of a birthday cake. She has on several occasions. Pancakes or waffles? I'm typically I see, like, this is something that, like, when I was a kid, I was definitely more of a waffles person. But as an adult, I'm becoming more of a pancakes person. I don't know why. I think that the thing is, like, a really, really good waffle will beat, a really, really good pancake any day of the week. But, like, You're just like average waffle versus your average pancake. Pancakes are slightly better. Honestly, I'm happy with either. Due to global warming causing more natural disasters, should we teach all able-bodied people survival techniques to help in their communities? Yeah, that'd make Kelly really happy. Um, what's the Marxist justification for state censorship in the USSR, PRC, Cuba? For the most part, it is countering. Their rationale is for fighting counter-revolutionary propaganda. Usually, they will say that it is to stop, like, at least in Cuba and the USSR, to stop the Americans from interfering and trying to use money and propaganda to turn the people against the revolution. Do they have meat pies like mince and cheese in Canada? Yeah, they do. They're not as like prevalent as they are in the UK, but they're there. Okay. What do you think about rural people owning guns because the police response time takes forever? I feel like in a lot of cases, adding a gun to a high stakes situation is going to cause more problems than it solves. Like, if you look at like the American example, having a gun in a house doesn't typically make it safer. If anything, all it does is turn a robbery into a murder. And at the same time, pulling a gun on someone when you don't know how to, when you haven't been trained in aiming and how to use it, increases your chances of hurting innocent bystanders. And on top of that, ups the pressure so that if the criminal has a weapon, that they are much more likely to use it in response, and kind of escalates the situation. So in many ways, I don't see a gun making the situation better. What I think about rural people owning guns for taking care, and also missed identity, like so many people get shot because they don't do it, because they just don't understand, or because they misidentified somebody or something like that. Do you generally agree with conservatism in the Canadian scope? No, I don't. How is anything I've said over the last 2 hours and 49 minutes led you to think that? Why did China end up so different from other Marxist revolutions? Because they decided to go with state capitalism. If your father was a retired cop, how would you explain to him that you believe cops are bad? Honestly, if it was my dad, I'd probably avoid the conversation because it just seems like a useless fight, and my dad does not like fights. I don't know. I would probably just explain my situation and realize that because your dad's a retired cop, that they're probably not going to ever see eye to eye with you on it, and it's probably not going to be. I can't imagine a situation in which they are going to agree with you. But luckily, you don't always have to see your dad. I only see my parents about once a month, so and that's more than most people that I know. So luckily, sometimes you can just smile and be polite for a couple hours a month, like I do with my in-laws at Christmas time. Is it possible to support left-leaning ideas and not be against capitalism at the same time? Is this just center-left? It's just called like being a liberal, basically. Why is the state necessary to accelerate people towards equality? I don't think it is. Do they have meat pies like Mr. I already answered that one. When do you stream on Twitch? I do not. Honestly, I would like to move away from... doing a Twitch stream is something I would like to do, but I also know that it's something I would like to do, but it's not something that I currently want to do, because the process of becoming a Twitch partner is probably quite a pain in the ass, And on top of that, I already stream 5 hours a week, and I think that is already lots of my week that I give up for streaming, and I don't really want to. I don't really want to add to that situation. Like I already stream more than I would like right now. But like, and so doing it more for Twitch would not be a thing because I need to make YouTube videos. And yeah. How do you decolonize the United States? What extent do we give land back to natives, if not at all? What does post-decolonization government look like? I honestly think that, if anything, getting rid of the settler colonial state and replacing them with indigenous states would be a good start. That's my proposition. I don't think that's going to be a thing that people will get behind, but I think that basing the Americas around indigenous territory is a stronger idea than just like having these settler colonial states around. They should be dismantled. Canadians and Americans basically live in a giant version of the illegal settlements in Israel. Just that we've had them for centuries, so people think it's okay. When did you fall in love with history? I have always liked history, even as a kid. My parents were really into road trips, and so I've gone on road trips all over the United States. I've been to 45 of the 50 U.S. states, and I've seen all sorts of cool historical stuff all over the country, all over the United States. And so I think that definitely was the thing that instilled it in me. Under a stateless form of communism where workers control the means of production, how does that fix environmental issues like carbon emissions, pollution, using resources too quickly? That's easy. Oh, that's an easy one to answer. That is because if you move to communism, then the goals of production, the goals of what your economy is designed to do, are not focused around maximizing profit. They can be focused around whatever outputs you want to have. So a strong planned economy would be able to factor in not damaging the environment and sustainability as factors for producing, which you can't do under capitalism, because under capitalism you can only do the thing that is the most profitable. Is the spread of capitalism, socialism inherently imperialistic? No. In many ways, spreading communism will be about defeating the entrenchment of socialist powers wherever they are. If anything, it's going to be anti-imperialistic. Okay. Should I read The Power? I don't know what that book is, so chase your bliss. Can Sanders supporters be brought along into communism? I hope so. I think that Sanders in many ways is a start, not an end, and I think that normalizing the idea of socialism and socialist ideas is a great way to start. I'm really running out of time, so I got to wrap up. I think we're going to have to make... All right, that question is the last question. So, Oaken Hill Hermit, you're going to get the last question. How does a communist/socialist society prevent the totalitarianism typically associated? Don't have a state. Not having a state is the best way to do it. Can we just bypass decolonization and go to post-nation states bit? Sure. I would love that. I'm definitely pro no state solution, but I definitely think that getting rid of these settler colonial states would be a better idea, or a better idea than having settler colonial states. Did you ever go to Alaska? No, that is part of my 5. I have not been to Alaska, Hawaii, Oregon, Washington, or Arkansas. And the last question, have you ever read Bernard Cornwell? Do you like the Sharp series? Unfortunately, I'm going to have to finish this with, I have not read those books. Sorry. All right, friends, this has been an amazing night. The turnout tonight is unlike any I've seen before. You guys are amazing. Thank you, so many people, so many new people who I'm so happy to see you guys here. I do this stream every Monday afternoon at noon, from noon to 2 Eastern, and I do a Tuesday evening stream from 7 to 10 Eastern, or 7 until I run out of questions or whatever. So please come back if you enjoyed yourself. And I hope that you guys have an amazing evening. Stay strong, love each other, and don't start a land war in Russia. Good night.